Back live with you tonight on In Focus. Let's turn to this now. Nigerians will on Saturday vote for a successor to President Muhammadu Buhari, whose 2 terms in office have come to an end. Political veterans Bola, Tinubu and Atiku Abubakar represent 2 of the biggest parties in the country, with an outsider, Peter Obi, fast gaining popularity among the youth. For more on this race, now joined by Dr. Wole Ojewale, a regional expert for the Institute for Security Studies based in Dakar, Senegal. Dr. Ojewale, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. Nigeria heading to the polls on Saturday, a fiercely contested presidential race. There are 18 candidates, but essentially it's going to be a 3-horse race between the 3, Tinubu, Obi and Abubakar. However, Muhammadu Buhari has already declared Tinubu as the next president of Nigeria, I believe. Do we make anything of that?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I think since they are both of the same political party extraction, it is just ideal that he puts his support behind Bola Tinubu. I think that is what he has done basically, and trying to campaign for him to become his successor. But far beyond that, what we also need to bring to reckon is the fact that the president has consistently maintained that he's going to give a level playing field for all the contenders to contest for the election and ensure that there is a free and fair that produces free and fair electoral process that produces the winner.
12 June 1993 elections are said to have been the most transparent, as opposed to date, as far as elections are concerned in Nigeria. Of late, at least in the last 4 or 5 elections, there's been delays in when the elections actually take place for some reason or the other. Do you expect any delays this time around?
Yes, I do not really expect any delay. What I envisage could put a spanner in the wheel of this electoral process this time around is the biting cash crisis, Naira notes, that is going on in Nigeria now. Although most analysts believe that this can largely affect voters' turnout, but I think the greatest challenge, which a lot of people are not talking about, is how this is going to affect the logistics and planning for INEC, because INEC vendor relationship could be compromised. They need to transport electoral materials to far-flung places, riverine areas, remote communities, and the INEC relies on commercial transporters to be able to do this. So we're talking about the commercial transporters in remote villages in Jigawa State, northwestern part of Nigeria, in Potiskum remote villages in northeastern part of Nigeria, or riverine areas of Bayelsa and River State where they don't even have vehicles, that you need to use canoe to get to those places. And those people are not people that have regular bank accounts where you can say probably you want to do a cashless transaction with them. So what I think is very, very important is to look into the direction of how this is not going to jeopardize the sanctity of the election in terms of logistics and planning that INEC have put in place. Because if they are cash-strapped, it implies that they might not be able to function effectively, and it might undermine the entire electoral process, affect the sanctity of the electoral process. We might just end up with something that is less than desirable.
Yeah. President Muhammadu Buhari came up on the ticket of he will be able to fight the insurgents. He's a military man himself. For the first time now, these particular 3 candidates are not former military leaders. Is that significant, and will that in any way hamper their efforts in dealing with insurgency?
It's not going to hamper their efforts in any way. And the reason is we'll have to appreciate the fact that since 1999, we are now having a break in a situation. I'm talking about a situation where we are not going to have any former military administrator coming on the ballot for the presidential election. Buhari has been there consistently, Obasanjo too. So, and to the question that you asked, I do not necessarily think it's going to affect how they are going to perform in terms of addressing the security challenges in the country, because they are the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, but it do not necessarily mean that they have to go to the battlefront. What is important is putting the necessary security sector reform in place, building the capacity of the military services, and then a third layer of the security, which is very, very important, is a serious police reform in the country that is actually going to position the police at the center of all these counter-insurgency operations. So I do not necessarily see any reason why they should not be able to live up to the expectations and their political manifestos as far as addressing security concerns in the country are concerned. Go.
Yeah, you've mentioned the currency, you've mentioned the policing reforms. Are there any other legacy issues the incoming president would have to deal with?
Yes, why the president, the outgoing president, the administration of President Muhammadu Buhari has done excellent work in terms of degrading the violent extremist group Boko Haram in the northeast. We have also come to the point that we are being challenged now by what is purely described as banditry in the northwestern part of the country. Farmer area clashes has not gone. Kidnapping is rampant all over the places. And then these amorphous criminals that are usually described as unknown gunmen all over the places. Separatist agitation in the southeastern part of the country. Oil bunkering is still going on in the south part and the oil producing area of the country. So I think even though the president has done well, to a reasonable extent in degrading Boko Haram, this pocket of violence that are also erupting has actually checkered whatsoever can be considered as a legacy achievement of the president in terms of what they've been able to do in the past 8 years. And this is what the incoming administration, the incoming president is going to be inheriting. And Nigerians are keenly interested in how the incoming president will be able to address this multiplicity of crises all over the places.
Peter Obi, a lesser, I suppose, known, or at least running under a lesser known party, the Labour Party, seems to have energized the younger voter. Is this going to work in his favor?
What we need to underscore is the fact that Peter Obi has clearly demonstrated himself as a major disruptor in this election. A lot of people say the party has no structure, the party is not present. But I think what they've been able to do in the past 8 years, gathering momentum on the social media and translating that into actual mobilization on ground is quite commendable. How is this going to affect his chance as a relative outsider? Because I do not necessarily think Peter Obi is an outsider. He's part of the political establishment. Don't forget that in 2019 he was a running mate to Atiku Abubakar at that presidential election. It's just that this time around he's campaigning and running on the platform of another political party. I would say basically that Peter Obi is going to have serious show in this election in the southeastern part of the country, urban areas of the south and southwest to a reasonable extent. He has also made a serious inroad into the north central part of the country, particularly the minority group in that region. So the only area where I think is probably having a serious uphill task is the northern part of the country. But I must say that to a large extent, he has a vanguard of youth behind him who are campaigning off on the social media and on the streets. And I think he's going to have a very good show in this election, like I said earlier. But is he going to win the election? I think is a very difficult question for anybody to answer for now. But he has really done extremely well in his political mobilization and campaign.
Bola Tinubu campaigning under the slogan, it's my turn. I think that is the direct translation of what he's been saying. Decades has been in the shadows. Is it really his turn? There have been some critics who are saying he has not convincingly addressed some questions around the health, around, of course, the fact that he didn't also attend the presidential debate, seemingly not going to work in his favor.
Well, in Nigeria, even though those are democratic culture that should be celebrated in terms of pushing forward your ideas and plans on a platform where you debate others. Unfortunately, we've not had that in the recent time, particularly among the major contenders. Yes, indeed, he said it is his turn, and I think that is left for Nigerians to judge now whether it is truly his turn if they are going to vote for him. But by and large, I think most analysts believe in terms of political spread, the spread of political structure, members of the National Assembly, State House of Assembly, governors, local government chairmen. They believe PDP and APC have a serious hedge above all the other 18 contenders. That is not in doubt. And I think that is the reason why there is a preponderance of view in the country now that this election, keenly studied, is actually a two-horse race. And it is in that sense that most people project that it is either going to be Bola Tinubu or Atiku Abubakar, that either of them is going to win the election. But if we narrow down to those two options, I think it's too early to call now. Yeah. But the election is being keenly contested in the country. Relative outsiders in the past 8 months have also shown that they are a strong challenger in this contest, particularly Peter Obi in this regard. And there is also Kwankwaso, former governor of Kano State, a state that has more than 5 million voters registered. So I think to a large extent, Nigerians are heading towards the poll, and everybody is interested in who is going to take the victory or the final analysis. But if I told the part of the popular opinion of most people, I think to a large extent the election is in between Bola Tinubu and Atiku Abubakar because of the national spread of their political parties.
Abubakar, much older candidate than Tinubu. However, there have been health concerns around Tinubu, and others saying he's appeared in some instances confused and somewhat incoherent. Do you think that's going to work against him?
You know, in the political season, every opponent is going to look for anything that he can use to play and secure some electoral advantage. And I think that is what is actually playing out now. I cannot hold brief for Bola Tinubu because I've not seen his medical record, and I don't, I can't really say so much about what is the state of his health and how that is going to affect his political electoral fortune in this election. But what I need to say is that at the base of electoral mobilization, at the base of political mobilization in Nigeria, issues, primordial issues like ethnicity, where you come from, your religious affiliation, the access to money to actually be able to mobilize. Elite, educated people might pay attention to policy programs and promises and political manifestos, but they don't actually come out on the election day to vote as they ought to. So that is the reason why largely electoral outcome in Nigeria in terms of who wins the election has been largely driven by rural populace, and these people have not listened to any of those contenders. They don't know whether Bola Tinubu is coherent or is incoherent. They don't know about the state of his health. They are going to come out to vote for the people that they have been teleguided to vote for based on these primordial factors that I mentioned. So I think the issue about the age of Atiku Abubakar, who is 75, Bola Tinubu, whether he's coherent or incoherent, is going to be largely insignificant in influencing voters' choice in this election, because people who are supposed to pay attention to some of these things will not even show up on the day of election.
Let's talk about Abubakar a bit. I mean, he has been investigated for corruption in the past. He's a businessman, as others say, a capitalist of some sort, who has made his money in various sectors in the country. Is that investigation going to hamper his ambition?
Okay, let me quickly say this way. The major three contenders have had one or two things thrown at them. And I'm going to talk about Atiku Abubakar. There is a case about a corruption case that is linked to even investigation in the U.S. Bola Tinubu has also been challenged on issues of drug trafficking. Peter Obi has also been challenged on the issues of tax evasion, the Pandora paper, in the recent time. So I think they all come with different baggages into this election, but maybe weightier than one another, I can't really say. But the case about corruption levied against Atiku Abubakar, like I said, that should be a policy concern for educated voters. But people in the rural areas, they hardly engage with policy issues like that, and it's not likely going to influence their electoral choice on the ballot. And let me also say that hardly will you find anybody that is undecided by now. They have been motivated by those issues that I raised earlier in terms of ethnicity, where the president is supposed to come from, where the president comes from, religion, and other primordial issues, to determine who they are going to vote for by now. And I can almost bet with you that it is only among the urban dwellers, educated voters in Lagos, in Abuja, in Kano, in Ibadan, in Port Harcourt, who are probably going to pay slight attention to some of these allegations that have been leveled against the presidential candidate, particularly the three frontrunners at this point.
When we speak about those primordial issues, I mean, is there such an unofficial arrangement that says the presidential or the presidency needs to rotate between Nigeria's northern and southern region, and the fact that Abubakar comes from the same northern region as the outgoing leader could, in a way, usurp his ambitions?
Yes, there is an unwritten agreement. Unwritten. Nobody has seen any document where this is written that the presidency is going to be rotating from north to south. But as we have seen, when Obasanjo finished, he brought about his successor from northern part of the country in person of late Musa Yar'Adua. Unfortunately, he died in the course of his administration, 2 years into the administration, I think. And then he was succeeded by Jonathan, who came from the southern part of the country, oil-producing state of Bayelsa State. And then subsequently, Jonathan completed the administration, contested again against the run of play, this gentleman agreement that no, it should be the turn of the northern at this time around, but he contested for the election and then he won the election. In 2015, there was a strong resistance that he couldn't win that election because of some political alliances that took place then. Now, Buhari is completing his 8 years, and then there is a preponderance of people in the country who feel after his 8 years as a president of the northern extraction, then the presidency should rotate to the south, and any of the states in the south should clinch the ticket and then contest for the election among themselves. But it didn't work that way this time around. Abubakar threw himself into the race. And I think to a large extent this has also been influencing the kind of political engagement that is going on. That took his party into a state of disarray, because about 5 governors in the party disagree with him. They are not campaigning for him. He couldn't even go to Rivers State to campaign because of this loggerhead that is having with him, yes, on Wike in the state, who also contested for the primary on the platform of PDP. So there is no written agreement that the president should come from a particular part of the country in our constitution or any policy document. But that gentleman agreement has been maintained over the years. And it took the governors of All Progressive Congress, or the northern extraction of those governors, about 10 of them, to decide and make a statement that this time around the presidency is going to rotate to the south, that their presidential candidate is going to come from the south. And that, to a large extent, has been influencing political, electioneering, and political campaign until now. And that is the reason why I think candidates like Peter Obi, candidates like Bola Tinubu are riding on that waves, thinking that it's going to work for them this time around, particularly because of the support that they enjoy from that Bola Tinubu in particular this time around, particularly because of the support that he enjoys from the Northern Governors Forum of the APC extraction. So I think that is what is tilting the balance this time around, that we are going to the 2023 poll.
Yeah. You've already mentioned the big question of dealing with banditry, violent crime, kidnappings that have been taking place, and generally the feeling of whoever comes in, whatever administration comes in, needs to obliterate the terror attacks. What do you think they should do? What should the president who comes in and his administration do to completely eradicate violence and extremism?
Wow, it's both a kinetic and a soft approach that will be needed this time around. But the first thing is that kinetic approach requires that the police is strengthened, the police is reformed. There's a preponderance of arguments in Nigeria now that we should have second layer of policing at the state level. See the policing power to the state government to be able to also have their whole police command and working with the federal force to be able to tackle some of these challenges of insecurity, kidnapping, banditry, violent extremism, and all those things. But much more important than that is the fact that the soft approach must also be paid attention to by the incoming president in terms of investment in education, in terms of creating job opportunities, creating an enabling environment that will allow businesses and private sector investment to thrive in the country, to be able to recruit some of these young people into small and medium scale enterprises, regular corporations, businesses, and then to be able to stem the tide of recruitment into violent extremism by this violent extremist group in the country. I think those are the key things that the incoming president must address frontally at this critical time. There is a need for critical investment in security, in agriculture, in education, and then even in public infrastructure like road and some of these other areas. Those are the pivotal areas. But the number one thing on the agenda of the incoming president is this issue of insecurity. It must be addressed holistically and comprehensively through security sector reform.
Dr. Wole, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for your intervention tonight and helping us in this conversation. Dr. Wole Ojewale, of the regional expert of the Institute of Security Studies in Dakar, Senegal.